We're selling the house." My mother said, her voice calm but final, like the clang of a judge's gavel ending all discussion. "It's for Brandon's wedding, of course." I blinked. "Did I hear that right, Elena?" She continued as if announcing the weather. "Chloe's found the perfect venue, a garden estate just outside Gastonia. It's a once-in-a-lifetime wedding, and we want to give them the best start possible." My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 35, a senior marketing manager for a regional logistics company here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've worked every day since I was 16, paid my way through college, budgeted, sacrificed, hustled. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Brandon just coasted. But this wasn't just favoritism. They were selling our childhood home, the place I learned to ride a bike, the porch where I carved pumpkins with my dad. The upstairs hallway still had a faint dent where Brandon crashed into the wall on a Razor scooter, and they were selling it for a party. For Brandon's wedding, I asked, slowly setting down my fork as my stomach twisted. The Mount Holly house. My father, Richard, nodded like this was the most natural decision in the world. It should cover everything. Venue, vendors, the whole 9 yards. Chloe deserves it. Brandon beamed from across the table, his fiancée Chloe practically vibrating beside him. "It's going to be magical, Lena. The flowers, the string quartet, even a custom cake tasting this week." "Where are you going to live?" I asked, though I already knew. My gut told me this wasn't just a financial decision, they had a plan. My dad cleared his throat. "Well, we figured we could stay with you for a bit, just until we find a smaller place. A bit." That was their favorite word. It never meant a week. It meant seasons, sometimes years. "I've only got 2 bedrooms," I said carefully. "We know Mom chimed in, but we won't be any trouble. It'll be nice to spend more time together again, like the old days." Brandon leaned forward, his grin boyish. "Lena, wait till you see the place. Chloe found it on Instagram. It has these glass garden domes, fountain chandeliers. It's like something out of a movie. 200 guests," Chloe added. "Live music photographers from LA. We want it all." I looked around the dinner table, feeling the air grow tight in my chest. $80,000. That's what my mother said they expected to spend. Meanwhile, I was clipping coupons, living modestly in a tidy 2-bedroom apartment, driving a 10-year-old Civic, and saving every cent for a house of my own. I'd assumed one day I'd need to help my parents with their retirement, not that they'd burn it all down to give Brandon a fairy tale, and then parachute into my life like I was the backup plan. And the worst part, they hadn't even asked. I should have known it was coming. Growing up, I was the little adult. While Brandon was building blanket forts and forgetting homework, I was setting the dinner table, color-coding flashcards, and getting straight A's. My parents bragged about my maturity to their friends, like it was some kind of prize, but it came at a cost. I didn't get to be a kid. I didn't get to fall apart. Because someone had to hold it together, and Brandon. He was the golden child. He failed algebra twice. My parents blamed the teacher. He wanted to play lacrosse, then fencing, then fly drones. He got everything he asked for. He totaled his car at 17, and within a week there was a newer model in the driveway. When I applied to colleges, I filled out financial aid forms alone at the public library. I worked 2 part-time jobs to avoid loans, skipped spring breaks, and graduated early. No one threw me a party. So when my parents announced they were selling the house, the one thing they had left for Brandon's wedding, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was. And worse, I still felt guilty for even questioning it. "So when's the big day?" I asked, forcing my voice into something light, almost cheerful. June 15th. Chloe answered, her smile wide. "Brandon proposed at Christmas. We've been planning ever since. That gave them barely 4 months to sell the house, plan the wedding, and apparently move in with me." "You found a realtor already." "Meeting her tomorrow," my dad said. "The market's great. We should get at least $130,000. They said it like it was a win, like that money would magically stretch forever." I just nodded. "Well," I said, pushing back my chair, "I hope it all works out." Brandon reached across the table, squeezing my hand like he was passing me a burden wrapped in gratitude. "Thanks, Lena. Seriously, "You're going to love having Mom and Dad around again." I smiled back, but inside I was already screaming, because I knew exactly what having them around again meant. My dad would take over my second bedroom, spread his tax papers and checkbooks across my dining table, like it was his personal command center. My mom would rearrange my entire kitchen critique, my laundry habits, and treat my bathroom like a shared dorm. And me, I'd quietly vanish from my own life again. But something was different this time. A part of me wasn't willing to disappear. 2 weeks later, it began. I was reviewing quarterly ad performance reports in my office when my phone buzzed with a message from my mother house. Showing went great. 3 offers already. Brandon's wedding is going to be amazing. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 3 offers. Already, I typed back a polite congrats and tried to focus on a spreadsheet, but the numbers blurred. That evening, Brandon called. "You won't believe it," he said, breathless. "They got an offer, $130,000. They're accepting it." "That's fast," I said, "and Mom was wondering if she and Dad could start moving a few things to your place this weekend." I paused. "My place? Just personal stuff," he said quickly. "Clothes papers, nothing big." "Right." I looked around my 2-bedroom apartment. One room was my sanctuary, the other was my home office. There wasn't an inch of space for boxes, coats, or my father's 6-drawer file cabinet he refused to throw out since 1989. This weekend, buyers want to close quickly. Mom and Dad have to be out by the end of the month. I didn't answer right away. I could feel my pulse in my neck. "Have you thought about what happens after the wedding?" I asked. "Where they'll live." Brandon hesitated. I figured. "They'll stay with you until they figure it out. It's not a big deal, right?" Not a big deal. Like my life was a guest room. Like my peace, my space, my years of effort were all just holding patterns until the golden boy needed backup. I ended the call with a tight smile in my voice, then sat in silence. I looked out the kitchen window at the city skyline. All these years I'd built this life for myself. Every couch, every framed photo, every plant was chosen with intention. I had routines, calm evenings, freedom. And now they were moving in, uninvited, unplanned, entitled. But I still wasn't ready to say no. Instead, I said what I'd always said. Of course. But deep inside, the word tasted like rust, and something inside me was starting to break. The doorbell rang at 8:00 a.m. sharp that Saturday. I opened it still in my robe, bleary-eyed and uncaffeinated, only to find my parents standing there with enough suitcases and boxes to outfit a touring jazz band. "Surprise," my mother chirped, brushing past me with an armful of clothes on plastic hangers. "We figured we'd get an early start," my father added, hoisting a stack of boxes labeled Kitchen Essentials Office Files and Important Documents. Behind them, Brandon, unloading even more boxes from the back of his truck. I blinked. I thought this was just some clothes and papers. "Well, we got a little carried away," Mom said, already hanging her coats in my hall closet like she'd lived here for years. "You'll see, it'll feel just like the old days." I highly doubted that. The old days didn't involve sharing one bathroom or my dad using my dining table as a tax center. Within 2 hours, my apartment was gone. The clean lines of my space were swallowed by their clutter. My mom declared my coffee maker inadequate and moved hers in. My father commandeered my home office, setting up a dinosaur desktop computer and asking for my Wi-Fi password at least 6 times. "Where am I supposed to work?" I asked, eyeing my displaced laptop. "The kitchen table," Mom sang. Cozy, right? Cozy wasn't the word I'd use. Over lunch, she casually mentioned Chloe's dress came in yesterday. $3,000, can you imagine? "But she looks like a queen. $3,000 for a dress. 1 day wear." I did some quick math. That was half my rent. Then Dad spoke. "Speaking of money, we might need to borrow a little from you, just until the check clears." I froze. "Borrow the flowers ran over budget," he said, "and Brandon's bachelor party in Vegas. It's going to be a bit more than we thought." How much, I asked carefully. $5,000, like he was asking for a soda. My stomach flipped. "I thought the house covered everything it did," my mom said quickly. "Mostly, but there's been a slight complication." Oh no, the buyers found issues in the inspection, Dad admitted. Roof and foundation. They want to drop the offer by $20,000. I nearly dropped my fork. So you're accepting a $100,000 offer, but you're still planning to spend $80,000 on the wedding. They nodded. And where are you going to live after? We'll figure that out, Mom said breezily. That's when it hit me. They weren't figuring anything out. They were settling in permanently. They'd sold their security to fund Brandon's fantasy, and now they expected me to carry the fallout. But the real bomb hadn't dropped yet. And when it did, I wouldn't be the same person anymore. The weeks blurred. My apartment became a crowded circus of wedding chaos and passive-aggressive takeover. Every morning I woke up to the sound of my mother reorganizing something. She rearranged my spice rack, criticized my skincare routine, and declared my bedding too sterile. My father had spread his contracts, receipts, and color-coded wedding spreadsheets across the coffee table like he was planning a corporate merger. And the $5,000 loan, it became $7,000. Then $10,000. The caterer needs a deposit, Mom said one night as I tried to eat in silence. Just $3,000 more. I set down my fork. $3,000 more. For food that people are going to eat for one night and never think about again. Brandon is so stressed, she replied, oblivious. We just want to ease the burden. Chloe's family is so elegant, we don't want to look small. Small, I was working 50-hour weeks, living like a minimalist monk, and apparently I was the embarrassment. What about after the wedding, I asked. Have you started looking at apartments? Another glance between them. Well, Dad said the wedding expenses have dipped into our down payment. We were thinking maybe 6 more months, just to get our feet under us, I laughed. Not out of humor, out of sheer disbelief. 6 months will help with rent. Mom offered like that was generous after draining my savings. But she didn't know I had plans. My lease was up in 2 months. I'd been saving for a down payment of my own, a house, a garden, a real office. Those dreams were dissolving like sugar in boiling water. That weekend, Brandon dropped by, grinning with excitement, flashing their custom wedding bands. Ro, you're seriously the best, he said, hugging me. Letting Mom and Dad stay here helping with money, it means everything. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled like I always had. Later that night, I sat alone in the only room that still felt mine. I opened my laptop and began to dig. Property management laws, lease violation clauses, tenant protections, and what I found hit me like a thunderclap. If my parents stayed past 6 months without being on the lease, they could claim tenant rights. Eviction would require legal action. My apartment, my sanctuary, could become a shared residence by default. And suddenly, I wasn't mad. I was awake. And for the first time in 35 years, I was done waiting for permission. I was going to take back my life. The final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding. I came home from work exhausted and craving silence, only to find 8 strangers in my living room. Jessica's aunt's cousins and bridal committee were crowded around my coffee table, sipping wine and passing around centerpiece samples. My mother turned and beamed. Elena, perfect timing. We're finalizing the bridal shower plans. In my apartment, I asked flatly. It's just family, she said, brushing it off. The space is perfect for 30 guests. 30. Mom, can we talk in private? I asked. We stepped into my bedroom, the only place I hadn't surrendered. You can't host a party here without asking. Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just one afternoon. No, it's my home, I snapped. And you didn't ask. Her face shifted. That soft, manipulative mask faltered, revealing something sharper underneath. Elena, you're being difficult. This wedding is important. I exhaled. Then answer me honestly. What's your plan after the wedding? Where will you live? Silence. Then a sigh. We overspent, she admitted. We didn't expect the repairs or the floral upgrades. We only have about $15,000 left. $15,000 in a city where first, last, and a deposit could eat half of that in one bite. So your plan is to stay with me indefinitely, just until we figure something out. And that was it. The moment I saw her, not as my mother, the woman who made casseroles and held my hand after breakups, but as someone who made reckless decisions and expected me to clean up the mess, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I took action. The next morning, I called my landlord. I explained everything. The unapproved tenants, the lease violations. He was blunt. You can either put them on the lease with higher rent or have them out in 30 days. I want them out, I said. Then I froze my bank account from any more family withdrawals. I'd already given $10,000. I wasn't an ATM, and then I made the hardest call of all. Brandon answered on the second ring. Hey, Lena, what's I need Mom and Dad out of my apartment by next Friday? Silence. What are you talking about? They're violating my lease. I've spoken to my landlord. They have to go. Elena, come on. The wedding's in 2 weeks, I'm aware. But this has gone too far. You're being incredibly selfish, he snapped. This is the biggest day of my life, and every day is mine, I said, calm but solid. I'm not sacrificing my life so you can have a fairy tale. I hung up before he could answer. Within the hour, the storm hit. Dozens of texts, missed calls, Mom showing up at my office in tears. How could you do this to us, she whispered. We're family. And family doesn't mean endless sacrifice, I said. It means making responsible choices, which you didn't. Then I handed her a folder listings I'd printed that morning, furnished short-term rentals, extended stay hotels, affordable apartments. She looked at them like I'd handed her eviction papers. In a way, I had. You want us to cancel the wedding, I want you to be adults. She left without a word. That week, something shifted. Chloe's parents started asking real questions. Expenses were cut. The bridal shower was moved to Jessica's aunt's house. No more orchestra. No Vegas bachelor party. And then 3 days before the wedding, Dad called. Elena, he said, voice low, I owe you an apology. For what? For everything. Taking advantage. Assuming. You were right to draw the line. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. Wedding's still happening. Smaller. But we'll manage on our own from now on. You sure? I'm sure. And are you still coming? I thought about it. About missing it. About showing up. About my brother. Yes, I said. I'll be there. The wedding was simple hot and thundercloud humid. Chloe wore the same dress. Brandon cried during the vows. My parents looked humbled. After the reception, Brandon found me near the parking lot. I owe you one too, he said. For everything. I didn't get it before, but I do now. I love you, Brandon. I always will. But I'm done being the family's safety net. He nodded. You deserve better than that. I drove home to my quiet apartment, my space, my peace. And the next month I made an offer on a small house with a garden and a door that only I had the key to. Looking back, I don't see what I did as revenge. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about protecting myself. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people you love is finally say no. Have you ever been treated like the backup plan? Share your story below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and protect your peace. What would you do if the man you loved stood silent while his father struck you? Boston in the winter doesn't whisper, it bites. The kind of cold that crawls past your coat and settles in your bones. I remember that night clearly because it didn't feel like winter. Not at first. I stood on the marble steps of the Corwin mansion, its white stone facade gleaming under spotlights like some ancient temple to money and pride. Every window blazed with warm light, daring the city to look inside and see just how perfect they were. I pulled my coat tighter around me, took a breath I hoped was steady, and stepped into a world that never really welcomed me. The warmth hit me immediately, so did the sound. Classical music humming beneath the clink of crystal glasses. Laughter that felt practiced like a performance rehearsed 1,000 times. The Boston elite filled the grand room like characters out of a high society magazine. Slick hair-tailored dresses, eyes that scanned and dismissed in the same glance. I wasn't one of them. 3 years of marriage to Alaric Corwin had taught me exactly how to disappear in plain sight. I'd learned to smile without showing too much, to laugh softly at jokes that stung. I'd studied their language, the pauses, the half-smiles, the way they weaponized politeness like a dagger dipped in honey, and I was still invisible. Alaric stood across the room, flanking his father like a loyal shadow. Dorian Corwin, patriarch of the family empire, towered in both presence and ego. Tall, sleek, powerful, the kind of man who expected the world to orbit him. And my husband, a perfect mirror, though somehow colder. He didn't notice me walk in. He rarely did. I made small talk with a woman who once called my dress charming the way someone might praise a dog for sitting. She droned on about Aspen and Michelin-starred chefs. I nodded my eyes, drifting toward the massive dining hall where dinner was being served like a coronation ceremony. The table stretched endlessly, a gleaming mahogany beast draped in ivory linen and floral arrangements that cost more than my entire apartment. Every seat was a role, every fork a cue. This wasn't dinner, it was theater, and I was tired of acting. Still, I tried. I kept my head down, smiled at appropriate moments, even let out a soft chuckle when Dorian made a comment about imported discipline referring to the household staff. I bit the inside of my cheek and reminded myself, just get through the night. But you can't prepare for betrayal. Not the kind that knocks the wind out of you and leaves you tasting blood. I was walking behind Dorian, balancing a glass of red wine and a dessert plate trying to pass it to a guest without bumping into anyone. My heel snagged on the edge of the rug just a second, and the wine sloshed forward a splash landing square on his pristine white shirt. Time froze. The room went silent, and not the polite kind, the kind that wraps around your throat. Dorian turned slowly, the disgust on his face curling like smoke. Then, without hesitation, his fist connected with my cheek. I didn't even feel the pain at first, just shock, and then warmth. A metallic taste spread through my mouth, and I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of the table. My hand flew to my cheek as blood dripped down my chin, dotting the marble floor in perfect, damning red. "You stupid maid," he growled, voice loud enough to echo. "Go wash my damn shirt." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. 50 people, 50 eyes, and not a single one blinked. Some looked away, some didn't, but no one stood up. I turned to Alaric, my husband, my partner, my shield or so, I thought. He didn't rush to me, didn't even look horrified. His expression was blank, frozen in something colder than shock. He didn't see a woman he loved bleeding. He saw an inconvenience. "Apologize to my father," he said like he was reading a line from a play, or "get out." Something inside me shattered, but not the way they expected. Not into tears, not into pleading, into silence. I grabbed a silk napkin from the table, dabbed the blood from my lip carefully, and straightened my spine. I didn't apologize. I didn't scream. I walked out. Each step echoed like a war drum across that marble floor. No one followed. No one stopped me. The cold hit me again outside. This time I welcomed it. I made it to my car, slid behind the wheel, hands shaking. The city blurred as I drove through frozen streets, headlights slicing through falling snow. At home, I kicked off my heels, dropped my coat on the floor, and collapsed on the edge of my bed. My phone buzzed beside me. I picked it up. 68 missed calls. Alaric, Dorian, over and over. A cyclone of their names. And a single text from Dorian. "You'll regret it if you talk." I stared at the screen blood still drying on my cheek. I thought I had escaped, but the real battle hadn't even started. The next morning, I woke to the pale gray light that always made Boston feel heavier. My head throbbed from the swelling near my cheekbone, but it wasn't just the pain that kept me still. It was the silence, thick, charged, the kind that comes before a storm. I hadn't cried, not when he hit me, not when my husband chose silence over me, and not even now, staring at my cracked reflection in the bathroom mirror, the faint outline of a bruise darkening across my cheek. But my body trembled like it was trying to catch up to the betrayal my mind already understood. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and jaw, more for the cold than for modesty. I didn't want questions. I didn't have answers. When I stepped into my tiny kitchen, the place that used to feel like sanctuary now felt like a waiting room. My phone was still lit with notifications, calls, texts, emails, but I didn't touch it. I poured stale coffee into a chipped mug and stood in the window watching the snow begin to fall again. Light, almost mocking. Then the voicemail icon caught my eye. Just one. From Dorian. I shouldn't have listened. Every cell in my body told me not to, but my finger moved anyway. His voice spilled into the room, cold and smooth like polished stone. Colopy. Accidents happen. But if you try to turn this into something, if you let that little outburst last night become more than it needs to be, you'll regret it. I have the best lawyers in Boston. Think very carefully. He said it so calmly, like he was commenting on the weather, like he hadn't cracked my lip in front of a ballroom of witnesses. Think carefully. I stared at the wall, at nothing. Then I opened the drawer by my desk. The notebook was still there. A plain spiral-bound thing I'd started months ago. At first, it was just thoughts, quiet rants I didn't dare speak aloud, but over time it grew into something else, a record, an archive, of slights, of comments made at dinners, of emails never answered. Of that day Dorian joked I was lucky to marry up. Of the time Alaric asked me to sign a post-nuptial amendment at dinner, sliding the document across the table like it was a dessert menu. I wrote it all down, page after page, memory after memory. Now as I flipped through, I realized something. I wasn't just journaling. I was documenting, and maybe preparing. A chill slid down my spine, not from the cold, but from the sudden sharp clarity that this wasn't just about one night. This was years in the making. I just didn't want to see it until now. The phone buzzed again. A new message from Alaric, please. Let's fix this before it gets worse. I almost laughed. Fix this. Like I'd broken a glass, not bled on their marble floor. That's when another name popped up on my screen. Marjorie. I hadn't spoken to her in years. We used to work together back when I still had my own job before the Corwins encouraged me to focus on the family. She was an old mentor, a retired attorney with a sharp tongue and sharper instincts. Her message was short. If you need a lifeline, call me. Don't wait. That was all. But it was enough. I pulled my coat back on notebook tucked under one arm scarf tight against the wind and stepped outside. The city was unforgiving that day. Wind slicing through my sleeves, snow falling sideways. But I didn't stop. I didn't check my phone. I didn't flinch when the streetlights flickered overhead like warning signs. I found her at a small community legal clinic in Cambridge, one of those forgotten places squeezed between a nail salon and a tax office. The kind of place the Corwins would never set foot in. Marjorie sat behind a desk cluttered with papers and half-drunk tea. She looked up the moment I walked in. Her eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but recognition. She didn't say hello. She said, sit. So I did. And when I opened my mouth, the words came out faster than I expected. About the party, about the bruise, about the years of quiet cruelty, the dinners, the documents, the fear. She listened like a courtroom stenographer, but when I finally stopped, her words landed like a gavel. You're not overreacting. You're underreacting. I blinked. Excuse me. You've been gaslit so long you don't even realize how bad this is. He hit you, in front of witnesses, and your husband told you to apologize. That's not a family. That's a power structure. And you're at the bottom of it. Something inside me cracked open. Not from grief, not from shock, from recognition. Marjorie leaned forward. You've got two choices, Colopy. You can shrink and vanish, or you can stand up, but you can't do both. I stared at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to shrink. I wanted to rise. She handed me a legal pad. Start writing. Names, dates, incidents, everything. I'll help, but you have to fight. I nodded, because I already knew the truth. If I didn't fight back, they'd erase me entirely, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, though fear was there humming quietly beneath everything, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying every moment I had let slide. Every insult, every cut disguised as tradition, every time I smiled through humiliation just to keep the peace. The silence in my apartment wasn't peaceful. It pulsed with everything unsaid. I sat cross-legged on the floor, papers spread out around me like a war map, my notebook, my calendar, emails. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it, "In Case They Come After Me." And they would. I wasn't naive anymore. As I clicked through documents and saved screenshots, I saw it. An old email chain buried in my archives. Dorian's assistant had sent it months ago, something about transferring property to a new trust. It didn't seem important then, but now it looked like a shadow move. Like he'd been preparing for war before I even knew I was a target. I saved it. Then I heard it, my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Another call. Alaric, again. I didn't answer, but I let the voicemail roll through. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept either. "Colopy, please, you're making this worse than it has to be. Just talk to my father. You know he didn't mean it like that. Don't throw everything away over a mistake. A mistake." I shut the phone off. There's a moment when someone shows you exactly who they are that you stop making excuses for them. This was that moment. The next morning, I called Marjorie. She picked up on the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask for what, she just said, "Come in." Back at the clinic, she had a stack of documents waiting for me, restraining order templates, incident reports, affidavits. "You need to file now," she said, "before they get to the narrative." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They're powerful colopy. They've got lawyers who know how to spin a story. If we don't document first, they'll paint you as unstable, emotional, vindictive." I almost laughed. "They already have." She paused, then nodded. "Then let's show them you're not just a victim. You're a witness, and you're ready to speak." I filled out the forms with trembling hands. It felt surreal writing out in black ink the words I'd never said aloud. Physical assault by father-in-law Dorian Corwin witnessed by approximately 50 guests. Husband Alaric Corwin instructed me to apologize or leave. As I wrote, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time, like I was building my own armor piece by piece. After the paperwork, Marjorie leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "You should know. This isn't my first tangle with Dorian." I looked up. "What?" She gave a wry smile. "Years ago, I represented a man who worked for him. Whistleblower case. Dorian crushed him, blacklisted him, ruined his career. But I kept the files. Couldn't let it go. My breath caught. You still have them in a box labeled unfinished business. Looks like it finally found its ending." She pulled out a weathered folder, yellowed edges and faded tabs. Inside were memos, email printouts, typed notes. One line stood out. "He intimidates in private, but smiles in public." 2 faces. 1 empire. It was everything I needed and more. We spent hours reviewing strategy. Marjorie wasn't just helping me survive. She was preparing me to fight. When I left the clinic that day, snow was falling again, not softly this time. Heavy, wet flakes that soaked through my boots as I walked. But I didn't care. I felt alive and angry and awake. I passed a bookstore and ducked inside for warmth. While there, I found a small leather journal with a gold clasp. I bought it without thinking. Back home, I wrote just 1 sentence on the first page. "This ends with truth, not silence." Later that night, my phone buzzed. But it wasn't Alaric. It was a message from a former Corwin housekeeper, one who had always been kind to me in passing. Her text was brief. "Be careful. He's building a case. Heard him say you were unstable. Wants to discredit you before you go public." My fingers tightened around the phone. So this was it. They weren't just warning me anymore. They were preparing to destroy me. I should have been terrified. But instead, I smiled, small, sharp. Let them try. I had something they didn't expect. A record, a witness, and a woman who was done being quiet. By the end of the week, I wasn't just preparing, I was hunting. My little apartment became a war room. Folders lined my coffee table, my notebook sat open next to my laptop, and sticky notes littered the walls with names, dates, quotes. Every time someone told me to stay quiet, I wrote it down. Every sideways look at those Corwin parties, every moment of humiliation repackaged as tradition. They thought I'd forget, that I'd move on, absorb the pain like I always had. They were wrong. I filed the restraining order. It was the first real action, a line drawn in legal ink, but I knew that wouldn't stop them. What came next was fast, too fast. Just 3 days later, before sunrise, I was jolted awake by a knock at the door. Not the casual kind, the kind that's sharp, deliberate. I opened it with hesitation, my pulse racing. A man in a long black overcoat stood holding an envelope. "Are you Colopy Corwin?" he asked, clipboard in hand. I froze. "Yes, you've been served." And just like that, he was gone. I stood in the hallway holding the envelope like it might explode, inside a formal lawsuit, defamation, libel, threats to the family's reputation. They were painting me as a dangerous, emotionally unstable woman with an agenda. The restraining order flipped against me. According to Dorian's lawyers, I had made repeated attempts to malign the Corwin name and was unfit to be around the family due to volatile behavior. It was like watching a stranger's story unfold, except it was mine. They were erasing me in real time. My phone buzzed. Alaric. Again. Against every instinct in my body, I picked up. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You brought this on yourself," he said before I even spoke. "We warned you. You should have let it go." "Let it go? You mean your father hitting me?" I hissed. "Publicly, on your birthday." There was a pause. Then flatly, "I told you to apologize. You chose the other path." I hung up before he could finish. For a few minutes, I couldn't move. Then I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Marjorie. She didn't even flinch when I walked in holding the court documents. Her face darkened, but not with surprise. "Let me guess," she said, already reaching for her glasses. They flipped the story. They called me unstable, said I've been aggressive for months. They got a former maid to testify I was emotionally volatile. Marjorie's mouth flattened into a hard line. They paid her off. It's textbook Dorian. Character assassination is the Corwin family's favorite sport. I slumped into the chair. They're trying to ruin me. Marjorie nodded slowly, fingers tapping the arm of her chair. "Because you're a threat, and powerful men only go to war with people they're scared of." That stuck. Scared. He was scared. The realization didn't feel like triumph, yet it felt like gasoline on kindling. She leaned across the desk. "Then it's time we make him sweat." The next few hours were a blur of legal language and fast typing. She filed a counter motion to dismiss the defamation suit and introduced a discovery request for any internal Corwin family communication that discussed me. It was bold, aggressive, but it shifted the momentum. Then she pulled something else from a locked drawer, a letter, typed, dated, signed, from a former Corwin business partner. "He gave me this 5 years ago," she said, "after Dorian ran him out of town. He told me to keep it in case anyone else ever needed it." The letter detailed fraudulent business practices, property manipulation, intimidation tactics. Nothing had come of it then, but now it was a pattern. I took a photo, emailed it to myself, backed it up twice. They'd called me unstable, vindictive, dangerous, but I had evidence, and a story they couldn't script. That night, I returned home exhausted. My apartment felt darker than usual, the streetlight outside casting long shadows across the floor. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my messages. I just sat at my desk, pulled out my notebook, and began writing again. But this time, not just what they'd done. I started mapping what I'd do next. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make them regret trying to destroy me. And I already knew where I'd hit them first. Their image. The Corwins had built their kingdom on image. Polished smiles, charity galas, magazine spreads showing them as the royal family of Boston's old money elite. Their entire empire wasn't just about wealth, it was about perception. And Dorian had always believed that perception was untouchable. He was wrong. The plan started in Marjorie's office a week before Christmas. We sat at her cluttered desk, the windows frosted from the storm outside, stacks of documents between us. She handed me back the file I'd been building for weeks: bank statements, internal memos, legal correspondence that should have stayed private, but hadn't. This, she said, tapping one page in particular, this transfer shows clear intent to hide assets, tied to his Beacon Hill property trust. It's shell work, probably to protect it from legal scrutiny, and it was filed 2 days before the birthday party I added, which makes the timing suspicious, especially if a reporter saw it. That's when it clicked. If they wanted silence, I'd give them something louder. I'd make sure everyone heard it. I drafted anonymous emails to investigative journalists, 5 of them, each one specializing in corporate fraud and Boston's high society corruption. I attached the documents labeled Key Incidents and included a simple line in each message: if you want to know what's really behind the Corwin name, start here. I scheduled them to go out at exactly 8:00 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Why? Because that was the night of Dorian's annual charity gala, his crowning event. Dozens of cameras, reporters, Boston's elite, all under one chandeliered roof. While he'd be on stage performing generosity, I'd expose his greed. The symbolism was intentional. That night, I dressed with care. Not in a gown, I had no invite, but in something sharper. A tailored black dress, minimal makeup, my hair pulled back. I wasn't there to dazzle. I was there to haunt. No one stopped me at the door. The Corwins were too prideful to put my name on the banned list. Publicly, they were pretending I didn't exist. That made it easier. Inside the ballroom glittered with opulence: crystal glasses, ice sculptures, a string quartet in the corner playing something elegant and forgettable. I saw them Dorian Alaric, their orbit of admirers and puppets. They didn't see me. Not yet. I stood near the back, just close enough to hear the podium. Dorian stepped up, calm and smug, his voice oozing performative gratitude. We're honored to give back this season. The Corwin Foundation has always believed that those with more should do more. The hypocrisy tasted like iron. Then right on time it started. Phones began to buzz, one by one. At first just glances at screens, then widened eyes, whispers, hands on shoulders. Then a journalist from the Globe stood up mid-speech and walked out fast. 2 others followed. Dorian paused. His smile faltered. He glanced down at his phone, froze. Then his voice cracked just slightly. This is slander. We will be taking legal action against any false accusations. He didn't finish, because at that moment 3 men in dark suits entered the ballroom. Not waitstaff, not guests, federal agents. They approached the podium with papers in hand. This is a subpoena for financial records related to the Corwin Foundation and its affiliated trusts. One of them said calmly but loudly enough for the crowd to hear. Cameras turned, phones lifted, and just like that, the man who once called me a stupid maid was stammering in front of Boston's elite. I didn't wait to see him unravel completely. I'd seen enough. As I turned to leave, someone grabbed my wrist. Alaric. His face was pale, his eyes wild. What the hell did you do? I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I just looked at him and said I watched the show. Now it's over. He didn't try to stop me as I walked out of that ballroom and into the winter night. Boston's cold never felt so clean. 2 days later, I met Marjorie in her office. She was already smiling before I sat down. He's bleeding, she said, handing me a copy of the morning paper. Federal audit. Donors pulling out. PR firm dropped him. The house of cards is wobbling. And the restraining order dismissed. Official, as of this morning. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. But the relief didn't come easy. Because even as I won, I knew what it cost. My marriage was ashes. My name had been dragged, bruised, nearly broken. I'd spent weeks surviving on adrenaline vengeance and legal filings. Now all that was left was silence, and the pieces I had to rebuild. You know, Marjorie said softly, "It's okay to grieve, even when you win." I nodded. I knew she was right. I'd burned the empire that once trapped me, but I still had to build a life from the scorched ground. The new apartment was small, one bedroom, creaky floors, windows that overlooked Boston Harbor like it owed me nothing but gave me everything. The silence here was different from the silence at the Corwin estate. This silence didn't judge me. It didn't press down like a weight or whisper insults into my ear. It just was. I sat on the edge of my bed the morning after the subpoena fallout, staring at the unopened boxes I hadn't bothered unpacking. My whole life reduced to cardboard and taped memories. I didn't even cry. There was nothing left to cry for. My phone lit up again. This time I didn't flinch. It wasn't Dorian, not a lawyer, not Alaric. It was Marjorie. One last meeting. Closure. When I got to her office, she was already waiting with a stack of printed reports in her hand. Dorian's empire is imploding, she said, handing them to me. Investigations are expanding. Financial assets frozen. He's hemorrhaging public trust faster than we expected. And you, she paused, eyes softening, are free. Free. The word didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like breath returning to lungs I didn't know were starving. The restraining orders dismissed. The defamation suit was dropped this morning. No retraction, no apology, just silence. I nodded. It didn't matter anymore. Their silence meant surrender. I thanked her, truly thanked her. Not just for the legal work, but for listening when no one else did. For believing when even I wasn't sure I should. She smiled. You found your voice, Colopy. I just reminded you what it sounded like. Later that week, Alaric asked to meet. I said yes, not because I needed it, but because I deserved the right to end this on my terms. We met at a quiet cafe near MIT, the kind of place we used to pretend to be normal in. He was already there, staring into a mug that had gone cold. When he saw me, he didn't stand. He looked smaller. Not in size, but in presence. Colopy, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I didn't speak. He continued. I was scared. Of losing my job, of losing my father's trust, of losing everything I'd been building my whole life. I thought if I just stayed quiet, it would protect us both. You didn't protect me. I said voice level. You watched me bleed and told me to apologize. He winced. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. There was a moment, a flicker, when the old ache came back. The part of me that still wanted to believe he was the man I married. But then I remembered the silence, the cold distance, the way he looked away while I stood humiliated and alone. I'm not here to forgive you, I said gently. I'm here to let you go. His lips parted like he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded. Can we ever rebuild? I smiled, sad but steady. I'm done rebuilding things that were never safe for me to begin with. I left a few dollars on the table and walked out. Outside, the wind coming off the harbor was bitter, sharp, but clean. I walked until I reached the water, watching the ferries crawl across the steel-gray surface, their engines humming like lullabies. Gulls circled above, screeching in the winter air. I remembered who I used to be. The woman who begged to be accepted, who played along, who made herself small at every dinner, who signed the papers, who swallowed the insults, who thought silence was strength. She died the night Dorian hit me. And in her place, someone else rose, someone who didn't ask to be let in, someone who learned that being cut out was sometimes the greatest gift. That night, back at my apartment, I lit a candle on the windowsill and sat by the glass, watching the lights blink across the harbor. My phone buzzed. A message from Marjorie. You did it. They'll talk about this for years. I typed back one sentence. Thank you for helping me burn it down. Then I set the phone down, wrapped myself in a blanket, and closed my eyes. Not in exhaustion, but in peace. Because the ashes of their empire weren't my burden anymore. They were my freedom. Have you ever faced something like this? A moment where you had to choose your truth over someone else's silence? Drop your story below and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Someone out there needs to hear how you rose too.